Hi, and today I'm making Viking Blood. Now, it's mead, but made with cherries, and I'm going to teach you how to do it in under 10 minutes. Hi, I'm Brian from City Steading, and I want to remind you something so you don't miss any of our videos. Make sure to subscribe and hit that little bell. That way you'll be notified every time we make something new. And while I have your attention, today I'm making Viking Blood, which is really mead. Mead is honey, water, and yeast. But then if you add fruit, it becomes a melomel. So it's honey, water, fruit, and yeast. And this one's made with cherries. So that's why it's Viking Blood. It's like from way, 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 way back. Not to be confused with this, which is, I think you pronounce that blood. I don't know. I speak English and I even do that pretty poorly sometimes. I'm sure this is a fine product. I mean, we own it. So how, it must be good, but they're not the same thing at all. So if you were looking for that, I'm sure there's other videos on YouTube that explain how to make this. I'm not making this today. I'm making real Viking blood. Sorry to all the people who really like the other one. Now, being a mead, this doesn't require a lot of ingredients, but it does require some equipment and things like that. I'm going to give you a full description of everything I use below in the description, and as well as all the quantities and things like that. So you can just sit back and relax. Everything's covered. First, we want to talk about sanitation. Now, back in the day, they didn't know a thing about sanitation. They actually thought that the stirring stick was magic. I'm not kidding. They didn't know what yeast was. So all they knew is that if they used this certain stick, it attracted the wild yeast, and that caused fermentation faster than if they just left an open vat walking around in the house. That's really how they made mead. Not anymore today. Today you want to use Star Sand. There's a lot of other really great products. And what you do, you just soak everything in there, everything you're going to use, every funnel, every little piece of equipment, anything you're going to use, put it in there. What I suggest, keep a big bucket or your sink full of it, because I always forget something. I'm thinking everybody else will too. A couple things you want to do before you start this is you want to take your honey, which we're using 3 pounds, two 24-ounce containers today. You want to put that in like hot water, not really boiling. I don't like to boil my honey. Some people do. I don't. I want to warm it so that it pours easy. And I'm using frozen cherries. Now you could use fresh ones. Totally good. You got to pull all those pits and everything. It's a little bit of a pain, but the frozen cherries, I got them at Publix. It's awesome. 3 pounds of frozen cherries. Look at that. See, that looks like blood. That's where they get the name from. Blood and maybe entrails. I don't know. Anyway, so you want to mash these up real good. The more you mash the cherries, the more juice you get out, the more flavor you get into the meat. Okay, one other thing that you might want to do before you get started is take a little bit of water and put your yeast in that in a cup. I got one right here, and that's called hydrating the yeast. Um, I'll have the type of yeast that I'm using. It's a Lalvin KV and a bunch of numbers. I forget, but it's good to 18%, and it's really good for taking the fruity flavors in meats. It'll be in the description. Sorry about that. Next step, put it all together. We got our fermentation vessel here. It says ale pail on it. Forget that. Today, it's a mead bucket. Now, this is a food grade bucket. You want to make sure that whatever you use is food grade. A lot of people will ferment in carboys. I did too, until just recently I learned something really, really interesting. By doing it in this, I have more oxygen. I can get to it much easier. And I like to do 1 gallon batches because, I get bored and want something new after like a week. So having, 5 gallons of something laying around is just way too much for me. So we do 1 gallon. But if you do 1 gallon and you fill it half with cherries that you have to remove, now you only end up with like half a gallon of stuff. Well, that kind of sucks. So I've started doing this just recently. I'm going to put everything in here, and that way I can fill it up to wherever it ends up, as long as it's not more than 5 gallons. And I'm going to have 1 gallon of product at the end. Makes sense, right? So we're going to start. This is very technical, so pay attention. Cherries in the bucket. I'm wearing a red shirt on purpose because I didn't want to get any on me. And I'm using a spatula because these are not cheap. And, this is where a lot of your flavor is coming from. So I'm just trying to scoop all the goodness out of there and get every bit of cherry juice. And I'm sorry, this is really hard to get on camera, but you can see that. All right, I think that's enough. I'll put that to the side. Give you a view down the bucket if you want to see it. Looks like blood to me. And I'm pretty sure Vikings had red blood too. I mean, you know, they're just people after all. Now comes the honey. Now I'm using clover honey. You can use wildflower if you really want to, but here's the thing. If you use a stronger flavor of honey, it could overpower the cherries. This is called a cherry mead, not a mead cherry. So you want the cherry to really come forward, right? So I warmed it so it does this. Look at that. See, it just pours right out. It's going to take about an hour to get all that in there. I'm not going to show you what it looks like in here now. You don't want to see it. What I am going to do, though, as soon as these stop dripping all over the place on me, stop making a mess. Come on, stop. I am going to pour some water. Now, this is reverse osmosis water. You can use any filtered type water. I mean, any good water. Basically, you don't want chlorine, and you don't want, you know, crap in it. Like, you don't want fluoride and all that crazy stuff. So if your tap water smells kind of iffy, don't use that. Use filtered water. I'm just giving this a little bit of a shake, get most of that honey out. You can never get all of it out every time. And of course, you know, you pour anything less than hot water in there, it crystallizes the honey and makes it that much harder. Just get a little bit in there. Shake it up real good. Pour it in. Okay. Now, as you can see, if you look at the side here, that's where the level is. It's almost up to a gallon already. However, I want a gallon of product when it's done. So I'm actually going to fill this with a full gallon of water. Well, what's left of the gallon that from what I did already. So that's right here. Again, I sanitized this pitcher. Everything's been sanitized. And as I fill this up, you see that level? It's almost up to 2 gallons. But remember one thing, in about a week, maybe 10 days, I'm going to have to remove all these cherries. So it's not going to be 2 gallons, all right? Spoon, sanitized spoon. Stir this up. That honey still has to blend together. This might take a minute. Now, one thing while you're doing this is yeast is pretty specific. It doesn't like to be too hot, doesn't like to be too cold. That's why you keep it in the fridge until you're ready to use it, and you don't drop it into boiling water because it'll die. You want this to be somewhere in the like 60 to 90 degree range. If it's more than 110, you're killing your yeast. If it's below 60, they're not going to be as active, so it's not as good. I know in Nordic lands they probably did it in 50 degrees. Well, guess what? We don't have to worry about that. Unless you live somewhere where it's 50 degrees, well, then make do. So I'm just going to use my handy dandy little temp gun here. And mine's coming out at 72 degrees, which means inside it's probably a little bit better than that. The only reason why it would be too cold is because I used frozen cherries that had to sit out for a long time. I was shocked. After 2 hours, they were still 17 degrees. Crazy. Anyway, so now they're not frozen anymore. Everything's in here. The next thing we're going to do is take what's called a gravity reading. And that's how we figure out how much alcohol is going to be in our final mead. Okay, so what I did is I filled up this measuring tube. This has a spigot on it, but it was kind of complicated to show on camera. And all I did is I filled up a tube. I didn't really think it needed to be documented that highly. Anyway, the next thing we're going to do is a hydrometer reading. Now, I like to use a hydrometer because I was using a refractometer for a long time. I found out that once alcohol is in there, refractometers are wrong. So I just make it hydrometer readings all the time. It's simple. It makes me feel like a mad scientist. And it's just, you know, it's something fun. So what you do is you put this in, and hopefully I won't overfill it. And there's readings down the side. Oh, look at that. Here we are. Okay, so once you put that in, it floats to a certain level, and there's a gravity reading on here that you can read. And this is reading 1084, 1.084, which if I even look at this, it tells me what that can come out to. Somewhere in the, it's going to be like maybe 13, 14% alcohol when it's finished. So, you know, that's pretty reasonable. It was supposed to be a little bit higher, but I actually used a touch more water in here than I really should have. So it diluted it just slightly, but it's okay. Now, some people throw this away. I'm not some people. This was sanitized. It's clean. Okay, the next thing you want to do is make sure, and this is why we use a big bucket, you get some air in here, okay? I stirred it good before, but I'm going to stir it rough. I want air in there. The first couple days of any fermentation, you want oxygen in your must. You know what must is, right? This is must. Same like wine, because technically mead is honey wine. So this is honey cherry wine, right? Okay, the only thing that's left is to put in the yeast. Now, if you listen to what I said to do, you have yeast over here hydrating in some water. See how it's all cloudy and, right? Great. So what we want to do is mix that up a little bit. Don't get anything on the bottom. And then pour it in. This is called pitching the yeast. I'm not going to do like, never mind. Just get it in there. If there was any little extras, make sure you get it all in. And I'm going to mix that around again one more time. Get it all in there. Get my lid. As you can tell, this lid is officially made for brewing. It's got the little hole. Put that on top. Now, some people will say you shouldn't put a lid on tight. We have cats, so I disagree with that statement for my house. Now, the final step is once you have your cap on, you have everything in there, to put in an airlock. I'm going to talk about this for just a second. What this does is it allows the gas, which the yeast is making, to force its way up, push this level down, and push this level up, and then it bubbles through and goes out. Now, some people will say, oh, just put like fabric over it. No. Some people will say, put a balloon on it. No. This is $3. You can use it for years. Trust me, a pack of balloons is going to be $3. You get to use them one time. This is better. What it actually does, stick it right in here. It prevents bugs that you don't want getting into your stuff. Okay? Now, what you want to do also for the first couple of days, give this a shake every once in a while. Maybe you can take the lid off, get some air in there, just like the first 2-3 days tops. Then you want to make sure you put this in a dark place, even though, yeah, this is opaque. Put it in a dark place, semi-cool. I like 70 to 72, 74 degrees. Our house gets a little chilly at night, maybe 68, but whatever, it's close enough. I am not one of those people that believes you have to use all these chemicals, you have to use all these preservatives and finings and stuff. If you really want to do that, that's cool. I'm not one of those people, so I just drink stuff that I like to make, right? Okay. Now, as far as time, there's a couple of steps that have to go with this. This particular batch, because it's mead and has cherries in it, in like a week to 10 days, I got to get those cherries out of there, okay? And because I don't want them sitting on it if it got moldy or anything, that's just bad. So I'm going to take them out. They've given up all they're going to give. They'll probably be white even when they come out. It's kind of crazy. So all of their juice is in there. Then I'm going to put this into a carboy. That's when you use carboys for fermentation. And it'll sit in that carboy probably anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. What it's doing is it's doing the final fermentation. All that yeast is really going to town, and you'll see it. It'll clear out, and it'll drop down, and it'll make this nice layer of lees across the bottom. And the rest is Viking's blood. I have high hopes for this one. This is my own recipe. I pained over it for days trying to put it together. Derica can attest to that. She was laughing at me. But I want this to come out a certain way. I'm really fond of cherries. I'm really fond of mead. So I figured, put them together. And then I found out they call it Viking's blood. And I was like, hey, we got to make this. Anyway, so if you like this video, don't forget to give us a like. And up in the corner, you'll see a thing that says subscribe. Hit the subscribe, hit the bell. That way you get to know everything that we do. And I really thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Have a great day.